Welcome to the Med Control Monthly Podcast, brought to you by the Oakland County Medical Control Authority. The Oakland County EMS system is made up of 49 EMS agencies and 15 hospitals that serve about 1.3 million residents with approximately 250,000 calls for service each year. It requires a constant stream of high-quality information to support such a robust and busy system. The mission of Med Control Monthly is to provide the latest updates, information, and trends to and on behalf of Oakland County MCA's EMS agencies and hospitals. This episode was recorded on August 9, 2022. I'm Jeff Lassers and I'll be your host. I'm the EMS System Manager of the Oakland County Medical Control Authority, as well as a full-time firefighter paramedic with the West Bloomfield Township Fire Department. For decades, there has been a steady growth toward the need to prepare first responders, municipal leaders, and citizens for mass casualty incidents. MCIs continue to become common events that overwhelm the resources and capacity of first responding agencies around the nation. In addition, these types of incidents can cripple the soul of a community, as witnessed in the months following the Oxford High School shooting. Unfortunately, active assailant events and other similar MCIs will happen again, and our first responder community must be prepared for the sake of our citizens and loved ones. In our last episode, we sat down with several local first responder leaders to discuss the value of preparing for mass casualty incidents. This small group dedicated countless hours over 8 months to develop and execute the 4th annual Trinity Health St. Joseph Mercy Hospital Symposium and the annual OAKWAY MCI training event, which took place on June 2nd and 3rd, 2022. The goal of this 2-day event was to enhance the preparedness of our local first responders so that they could be ready to protect our communities during and after future MCI tragedies in and around Oakland County, Michigan. Day 1 was held on June 2nd, 2022 at the Trinity Health St. Joseph Mercy Oakland Hospital in Pontiac, Michigan, and included multidiscipline lectures from leading experts as well as breakout sessions developed exclusively for EMS participants. Day 2 was held on June 3rd, 2022, and included immersive experiences with several classes offered in cooperation with OAKWAY fire departments at the UWM Sports Complex in Pontiac, Michigan. Day 2 featured a capstone event where participants engaged in a full-scale MCI drill from dispatch to resolution with select patients requiring transport to the simulation lab at Trinity Health St. Joseph Mercy Oakland. Upon arrival at the hospital, the learning experience continued as nursing and physician staff received and treated a surge of the simulated patients. Although it took 8 months, dozens of meetings, and countless emails and phone calls, the event was a huge success, and it's safe to say that the juice was worth the squeeze. These types of events are a massive undertaking, and it requires dedicated people and strong relationships to be successful. Within a week of the event concluding, the planning group conducted an after-action review, or AAR. To put it simply, the purpose of an AAR is to objectively identify, organize, and prioritize the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of the event and its execution. The idea is to clearly and concisely organize how they will objectively sustain strengths, mitigate weaknesses, take advantage of opportunities, and eliminate any potential and/or real threats from happening again. In today's episode, we will cover the outcome of the full-scale MCI drill that took place on Day 2 by discussing key outcomes of the AAR. The goal is to share our experiences and lessons learned to inspire more first responder agencies to plan and execute training in preparation for future MCIs. You can find a direct download link to the AAR in the episode description. During the development of this event, strong relationships were built with multiple private companies that sponsored the activities, logistics, food, and equipment. Thank you to Belfour Restoration and United Wholesale Mortgage for your support. We could not have pulled this off without you. I'd like to give a special thank you to Darcy Lutzinger, the Director of Security at UWM, for your amazing kindness, hospitality, and professionalism while planning and hosting this event. Also, a big thank you to Dan Flanders at Belfour for your unmatched love and support of the first responder community. Thank you for listening to the Med Control Monthly Podcast, providing the latest updates, information, and trends to and on behalf of Oakland County MCA's EMS agencies and hospitals. Check out the episode description for additional info, links, and a list of today's guests. Now enjoy the show. Good morning, gentlemen. How are you?
Wonderful.
Morning.
All right, let's start off with you, Mike Sova. Who are you? What do you do and where do you do it?
Hello, I'm Mike. I am the EMS coordinator for Bloomfield Township Fire Department.
Alan Van Heck, who are you?
Hey, avanheck, Bloomfield Township, Battalion Chief, been here 27 years, teach for a lot of different agencies in the hazmat world.
Thanks for joining us, sir. Lieutenant Jeff Bailey, welcome.
Jeff Bailey, I'm Lieutenant of West Bloomfield Fire Department. I am tasked with our rescue task force, fire as a weapon, and all kinds of MCI training and whatnot.
Lieutenant Etzin.
Good morning. I'm Etzin. I'm the former EMS coordinator and current training officer for the Farmington Hills Fire Department, and also serve as the Fire Department and Emergency Medical Services Coordinator for the Oakland County Tactical Training Consortium.
Well, thanks for being here, sir. And Chris Lopez.
Good morning. Chris Lopez, Trauma Program Manager at St. Joseph Mercy, Oakland.
Well, thank you guys for joining me today. And as we discussed in the intro, we are here to talk about the event that we did in June 2022 at the UWM Sports Complex. We had a mass casualty incident event that we put on for first responders in our community, focusing on patients that experience significant trauma and then transporting them off scene. So what we're going to do today in this episode is talk about the results of our after action review. And what we do essentially in an after action review is identify the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, itemize all of them, prioritize all of them, and then make a plan to do it again better. So let's start off with these strengths. Chris and Mike, you guys were the ones who were responsible for getting this thing started. And it took a lot of different groups to kind of come together. The number one strength that was identified was strong multi-organizational agency and discipline collaboration. Can you touch on that for me?
For sure. We all recognized early on that if this event ever happens in real life, it's going to involve every resource from every community and every discipline. We frequently trained with just fire and EMS. Recently, we've involved the police department, but this time we took it a step further and involved one of our local hospital systems. We involved our dispatch centers. It's not even just going to be this dispatch center that the event occurs in. It's going to be spread out amongst many dispatch centers. We reached out outside of our mutual aid pact and involved private EMS and other fire departments nearby. So pretty much anybody that would work on a scene with us on this really bad day was invited to participate. We had a very good turnout and a lot of people involved with that.
To Mike's point, one thing we identified was that a lot of trainings only involve one discipline at a time. One of the things we wanted to do with this event was do what you had said, and that's bring together a multidisciplinary experience where we can work together in real time and play out a scenario as though it were actually happening.
So day one was at Trinity.
We were very satisfied with the turnout, and we're happy that we had participants from all over the state join us.
Right on. Yeah, it was really cool. And considering day two was on one of the most gorgeous Fridays we have in June in Michigan. And then, it was so nice out. And in the summer, a lot of first responders either take time off and we're already running short. So it's not easy for agencies to send people. So I think we still had really good attendance considering all of those things. And we should probably touch on, guys like you there, Battalion Chief Van Heck, you have to deal with staffing a lot. So day two, I think, was successful in that. But, do you have any thoughts on staffing in this time of year for this type of event?
Really difficult doing it in the summer. It was really, really difficult trying to get people to commit with everything that was going on. I know one of the hard things we had was even some of the private companies just saying, hey, we'll send you some rigs, but if we get busy, we're going to have to put them in service. And the same thing applied to our fire departments. We had people that were going to be at the training, but it was all run dependent. And summertime was a really tough time to put this on. But I don't know with our current staffing levels if any time of the year isn't going to be tough.
Etzin, as a person who's done a lot of EMS coordination and also now you're a training officer for multiple organizations, can you kind of touch on that?
Well, absolutely. Actually, I recommend training during inconvenient times of day and times of the year because we want to stress our system even in training. When we're resource rich, we're not necessarily getting an accurate reflection of what resources are going to be available to us should an actual incident occur at an inopportune time, whether it be during the evening hours, in the summer when many emergency responders here in Michigan, if they're not working, are up north, or also during the winter with snow on the ground. I think those are actually the best times to train. And then you'll find that when an incident occurs during times where you're resource rich and the weather is more cooperative and it's not a low light environment, you'll find that the incident will actually go smoother than what you remember in training.
Yeah, it's kind of 2 points between what you and Alan just brought up. There is, you got to practice like you play, like you're saying, and there is no perfect time to train, which is what Alan is saying. So you got to kind of balance all of these things and ensure that you're able to stress your system when your community's stressed. Because if you don't practice like you play, it's going to hurt when you get punched.
Well, and I would also add, too, that being a student of history as it relates to these types of incidents, these offenders out there are, in many instances, students of history as well. They're studying their predecessors. They're replicating tactics. They're trying to improve on the tactics of those that came before them. And they realize that there are numerous tactical advantages that are associated with attacking a particular venue during those inopportune times, especially at night, especially after midnight, where hospital staffing and public safety staffing is certainly not as robust as it might be in the middle of the day.
You know, one of the other things that we included was realistic mock patients. That's not easy to get this type of year either. Chris Lopez, how did we get such fantastic participation from these nursing students who are our mock patients?
I think the theme for that follows with what we've already said. It's all about partnerships. Fortunately, here at Trinity, we have a strong working relationship with University of Detroit Mercy and their nursing program. And we were able to get over 30 nursing students to participate in this drill, with several undergoing full moulage to be our victims of this MCI. We're also very fortunate that our hospital system is an education source for trauma training. So we have relationships built with moulage artists as well that were able to help us put this together.
Yeah, I think it really created a benefit to the situation and the feeling. Obviously, I don't believe any of us have been involved in an MCI like the one we put together, but it was nice to have a training scenario that actually included many people that we didn't know. So you don't have a personal connection to this human being in front of you. So it's less of messing around during training. And then on top of that, they added a lot of moulage, which made it very, very good. And also these participants having a nursing background, you could tell them a sign and symptom, and it was pretty obvious they knew what they needed to do. So the realism part of this is we actually deployed our real RTF bags, and this assured an increased familiarization. No time like the present to put you in a situation that we made as real as possible to look at your bag. And so number one, it forced everybody to look at that RTF bag and make sure it was stocked correctly. And then what was interesting is that one agency would show up with a bag that is supposed to be stocked the exact same way. And maybe that was just like slightly different. These things were on this side versus this type of bandage on that side, and the number of them may be off by one. So it gave us an opportunity for a lot of newer members that weren't around when the RTF bags went in place to look at them. So I think this was a strength to just get hands and conversations on this gear and equipment.
Another thing that this exercise afforded us was the opportunity to evaluate the equipment that we're carrying and to see if there's better stuff out there, if there's been more advances since we purchased and put together these kits, and better ways to deploy them and whatnot, which I think as a whole let us have a goal and some ideas as to where we're going in the future with us.
Absolutely. Now, the use of all this equipment was facilitated through the development of some high quality training lesson plans, and we've created them so that we can share them with everybody. The OCMCA CE sponsorship is now hosting all of the lesson plans that we use to pull off this event. Every agency is capable of using them. They're pretty cool. Check them out. We'll put a link in the episode description, and then you can always email me directly and I can send them out to you. When we look at the use of an RTF bag, we don't want to just hand the bag or the patient to them and say, ready, go. We spent a lot of time identifying the objectives and the outline of how we wanted to walk through certain use of the equipment. All of those resources are very self-explanatory. They're available to everybody. And one of our biggest strengths goes back to partnerships, but specifically local private industry really stepped up on this one. UWM out in Pontiac, Michigan, specifically the UWM Sports Complex, donated a very large area for us to utilize in a very safe manner. And we were able to exercise these functions during this event. And then in addition, Belfour Restoration contributed some nice sum of money to help us put this event on. And they sponsored the event and allowed us to really pull it off. So thank you guys very much.
I thought it was very impressive that we had two corporate partners as large as UWM and Balfour are. They obviously recognized the importance of this. They each have a lot of employees who live and work in Oakland County. And I think for them to contribute in the manner they did was very beneficial for everyone involved.
I think we can all agree that it's a really good jumping off point for more future events. And we're just hoping that the lessons learned here today is going to help our friends out at Waterford Regional Fire Department. And our real good buddy, Lieutenant Jim Cooper, will help you out, bud. All right, let's get on to the weaknesses. So number one, I think the biggest weakness we need to tell people is that although we had 8 months of planning, there's never enough time to plan. Mike Sova, you want to touch on that?
Yeah, there are a lot of moving parts. We wanted to make this as big and all-inclusive as possible. To incorporate as many disciplines and agencies that we did demanded a lot of preparatory time. In order to provide CEs, you have to follow the timelines the state requires. In order to secure funding, you need to meet those individuals and stakeholders to make sure all those things happen. To order chairs and pipe and drape, that takes time in order to set stuff up. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into this. A lot of stuff that we never dreamed of that you would have to think about. We had to account for and planning on extension cords and signage, in addition to getting people to show up and advertising for it. It's a huge undertaking. There's never enough time to plan. And the more time that you have, the more people you can get involved and the easier it becomes.
From the hospital side, Chris Lopez, why is it important to really get on this immediately?
What we found is that the ideas that we have started very large. And as time went on, we started to realize what was a reasonable expectation that we would be able to pull off with the amount of time given. So being able to scale big dreams into a realistic event was very important. Like you said, even though 8 months sounds like a tremendous amount of time, it's very short when meeting every other week or even monthly in the beginning as things get off the ground. Time becomes very limited. Time crunches are inevitable, and being able to truly scale your event for the time and participation that you have is extremely important.
Agreed. One of the other things we identified was the weakness that kind of ties to that is making sure that the learning activity schedule is very simple and straightforward. Because if your plan is extremely simple, if for everything, it's going to be easy on everybody. Because I think we found was for every idea we had 10 problems we didn't see coming.
Well, I think what we tried to do initially was make it so open and available for everyone. We kind of made it too complicated by making it too simple. We wanted to make several class sessions that would be open to everyone at a more convenient time of their choosing, when in reality, that opened the door for needing more instructors, more classrooms, you name it. So learning from that, I think we'll be able to make a better format for our education in years to come.
Totally. And I think Chief Van Heck, you'll agree, no overlap for education anymore. Make sure there's clear timelines where there's not a bunch of overlap and chaos going on.
Yeah. Sometimes when you're dealing with firefighters and paramedics and you're trying to get several classes in, it's a little bit like herding cats. So you got to keep everybody focused. Keeping them on a timeline is difficult. Just got to have somebody with strong personality, keep in charge of them and keep them moving, keep them in the right spot.
Right on. Lieutenant Bailey, you and I were talking about not only the simplification, but the understanding and acceptance of that venue, right? So not only a simple schedule, but one that fits within the venue.
Yeah, we encountered some issues with setting up your lecture areas, having the proper lighting, having the proper power available. We wound up having that one venue, all the lights were controlled for the entire venue by one switch, basically. Things like that, access. And then when we're scheduling it, we need to schedule these events realistically because departments and agencies are committing their resources. So they need to have a defined short timeline that we stick to that timeline, because sometimes they're shuffling multiple people in and out at different times and their resources that are already on duty.
Totally agree.
Something I wanted to briefly discuss is that first and foremost, I believe that what we're talking about here is simply another discipline within technical rescue. It's yet another example of members of our community that are in a bad way within an austere environment. And provided we have the equipment, the training, and the procedures to operate, to insert ourselves into that environment and operate, then, obviously we're hoping for the best outcome we can achieve. The problem is, I believe there's a lot of perceived mastery out there because of some checkbox training. I've dealt with a number of communities over the years where they've trained over a certain period of months or years or whatever the case is. And at the end of the day, they said, we're all over this warm zone care. We're all over this collaborative response to active violence. And yet they're not, because when their test comes in some other disciplines within technical rescue, everyone's striving for in a trench rescue or a hazardous material situation. Not to say there aren't complexities involved with all of those scenarios as well. People are striving for A's and B's. And there's very little mastery in this amongst not only fire departments, but law enforcement agencies throughout the country as well, because we just don't know what's going to happen until it all shakes out. And one of the fundamental issues within the fire service is the lack of risk appetite that incidents like this may require. There's a lot of fire departments out there that call themselves all hazard fire departments and pride themselves in their aggressiveness when responding to structure fires and technical rescue and other special responses. And that may very well be the case, but there are very few fire departments around the country that possess the risk appetite for them to operate within these environments in as timely a manner as they think they will. We have to make sure with our training that we are not setting people up for failure, that we were factoring in the unpredictability and the fluidity of these incidents. And we just can't have it all going according to script from start to finish, because that's what our people will expect when they're responding to an actual incident. And if they get that curveball in the dirt in the first 5 minutes, it's going to knock them off of their game or knock them off of their algorithm. And then it's going to all go downhill from there. I think a message that I have to public safety executives is we can get very good at other forms of technical rescue, vehicle extrication, hazardous material, trench rescue, high angle, swift water, whatever the case may be. It's very difficult to get good at this because we may get one repetition over the course of our career. So the message I have for the chiefs out there is I realize this is a low frequency, high risk situation, but I would say none of those aforementioned incidents that I mentioned can destroy the community's confidence in a fire department or a law enforcement agency and literally damage a generation of emergency responders like one of these incidents that's handled poorly. So I realize that we have to be good at 100 different things, and we have challenges every day with the training schedule and the operational tempo that we all deal with, but we just must carve out the time, as much time as we can, to be as good as we can be when that test comes. And I would say that on incidents like this, we're striving for a C. We can always strive for an A, but we're probably not going to get it. If we get a few things right more than the things that we get wrong, at the end of the day, that's probably a win compared to many of these other, incidents over the course of history.
Well said, Jim.
To go along with what Jim was saying, that falls on us as planning the drills to make sure that the urgency is there when we're doing our practical evolutions, to make sure we're not just walking through the motions. Oh, yep, I'm here doing this. I'm placing a bandage. I'm putting a tourniquet on, but actually have the participants in the practical part of these drills have that sense of urgency to complete their task in a timely manner. And that will help increase some of that hype or the sensory and things like that they're going to deal with as well in this type of an incident.
Yeah, I think this all leads well into our next weakness. It really shows that the next step is to increase the preparation and scalability of our instructional staff. When we talk about that hunger at the technical rescue level, I think one of the biggest aggressiveness to agencies that covet that is they have a lot of really good, super motivated and empowered instructors. And I think the time has come to get better preparation and resources set around a set of skilled instructors to really bring this type of continued learning opportunity to these EMS providers, to these first responders, so that they can understand and appreciate basically what you're saying.
Well, Jeff, I'm glad you said that. And one discipline that comes to mind that somewhat parallels what we're talking about is structural collapse. Because in many other instances, you can make a rather quick determination whether it's a rescue or recovery. And that's obviously going to set the tempo for all of the emergency responders. These incidents are so dynamic, it's very difficult, even if unified command is established right away, for a unified command to get that intelligence in a timely manner. And then it becomes challenging for the responders at the tip of the spear to maintain their tactical momentum. And to keep that sense of urgency that Jeff talks about, that's so critical. Our training has to prepare our responders to not have the benefit of all that information up front and to get it in pieces and maintain or regain that momentum when the situation calls for it.
And on top of all that, our final weakness is more of an acceptance, is just appreciating that we're going to have to continue to do more with less. It's not like we have a bunch of people taking first responder jobs right now. So it's not like we have this huge influx of humans that can pull the calls while we're doing the training. So that weakness just needs to be accounted for. But to Jim's point and to Alan's point earlier, there's no perfect time to train. You should always be training under stressful conditions anyway. All right. So the point of an AAR isn't just to list your strengths and weaknesses. It's to then look at two other things: opportunities, things you could take advantage of, build on, and synergize, and threats, things that could potentially knock down the house or the plan. So the number one opportunity, I think, to any agency is that you need to be planning your next event or your first event as soon as possible. Number one, if you're Waterford, get on it, because you got about a year and a month. It took us 8 months to get this thing rolling. We recommend about a year if you're going to go this big. But remember, you can always do a lot smaller things.
A big part of the planning is developing the relationships early on. Initially, it was the 3 or 4 of us that were trying to accomplish everything. People really want to be involved with this and bring a lot of expertise and experience. And you can lean on those people to help you with this instead of trying to figure it on your own. People that have done this before, have gone through these experiences, develop those relationships early on, and it makes everything a lot easier.
Yeah, I agree. Take the opportunity. Call your dispatch. You did that, got them involved. Find out who your local CERT team is, because they can handle traffic control for you. It's amazing who's willing to help if you just give them enough notice. So it's an opportunity to take advantage of all those great groups out there. And then our other opportunity based on planning that is take that long time to design real life timelines for your events. It takes a long time to develop a realistic scenario, and then it takes a long time to get everybody prepared to facilitate it.
Bringing together the amount of resources that we did for this drill was phenomenal. Trying to get everybody to play, everybody to commit, everybody to be on the same page, and working towards making this a great training opportunity for everybody is a monumental feat that this group pulled off, and it was fantastic. Having the lesson plans pre-set up, having your instructors have a few weeks to perfect what they're going to teach so they know what they want to do and that they can put on the best opportunity if they need to change things, if they need to work things on the practical side together to build these lessons plans. The instructors all need to be chosen and supported and given their curriculum early on in this so they can be very competent at presenting the program we're trying to send out.
In the future, one of the things I'd like to see is I'm a firm believer in the merits of stress inoculation. And I think that there is some preparatory training that we can do prior to these exercises in the future to put our emergency responders under duress, yet in a controlled environment, to promote them being more high functioning than they otherwise would. In other words, to push through the initial shock of the event and take less time to acclimate to their surroundings and consequently be more successful in their attempt to save lives.
Yeah, I think you're speaking to, in a way, resiliency training. We talk a lot about resiliency and mental health, but also when I'm on scene, I got to work. So it's resilient to the moment and getting through that. And I think you're right. That is a certain need to continue to create as much realism as possible so that you know what you're going to be dealing with.
Yeah, and I would say the more hyper-realistic your scenario is, the more critical that stress inoculation piece is as well. One example is providing emergency responders with formal training in heart rate and breathing control. Having them commit that to memory, their brain will remember it when they're faced with stress later in life and see what kind of advantages or improvements that creates in the training environment later on.
With this event, our facility usually does a lecture series every summer for our trauma symposium. This year, we worked early with Captain Sova at Bloomfield Township to get this drill off the ground. What we wanted to do was create an event where we were able to have that real life feel where we were receiving patients and a surge experience within a simulated ER. I can't stress enough how important that is for people to feel and experience that rush of acuity and uncertainty. Unfortunately, we were able to experience that in a real world setting last November. But for many, an entire career will pass without that experience. And an event like this can really simulate what to expect and what the experience would be like and how to prepare. Obviously, no amount of preparation will ever make you ready for a real MCI, but at least it gave our providers, it gave our nurses, it gave our paramedics a good feel of the community and all the resources that are available to them and how we can work together to make the best of a real life tragedy.
Yeah, I think it's a huge to take an opportunity to increase real life variables for all of your scenarios. The final thing we talk about in an after action review is the threats. So we don't just talk about opportunities, things we could take advantage of to increase our capabilities. We talk about the things that can take down the plan. We came up with 3 big ones. Number 1, the biggest threat was financial and asset costs. Things are expensive. And then when you try to start training people prior to, and you're scheduling training and all these resources and humans got to be at meetings, things start to add up. So it's very important to have a financial plan to meet the overall training objectives.
I think with the way these threats are evolving and happening almost on a daily occurrence throughout the world, leadership at the top is recognizing the importance of this sort of training, and funds are starting to become available. If you don't have those relationships with the people that have access to that money, it's certainly more challenging. And proving that these events have positive outcomes makes it easier to gain access to the funds later on, I think is what we learned here. But if budgets dry up and our corporate sponsors aren't able to contribute the way that we did, we definitely have to rework the entire situation and scenario to try to make it more cost effective. I think we were very frugal in everything that we did and tried to give the biggest bang for the buck. I think we did an awesome job with that because we reached a lot of first responders over a lot of disciplines and involved them for very minor cost to especially our fire departments and agencies. But that's a huge thing that drives any sort of training. If you can't send people there and buy the props and just the basic necessities of the training, it can't happen. So we're very fortunate to have the partnerships that we did, and we're able to make it work. But I think we can build upon that, certainly, but it's a big threat.
Jeff, I would add that I think one of the greatest opportunities out there is doing something that many in public safety or even government service are uncomfortable doing, and that is reaching into the private sector where there's just indescribable money available. They certainly have interest in protecting their corporate infrastructure. So there are probably a myriad of businesses throughout Oakland County that would contribute on an annual basis to this type of training. It's just a matter of creating an ambassador per se that can go out and form those relationships and educate those business owners and let them know that they can play a role in being part of the solution. I think sometimes we have our heads buried so far in the trough of federal grant money that we never pick our heads up to look around and see what other revenue streams might exist. And there's a very close network of influential and wealthy residents of Oakland County, a pretty tight network, actually, where, you get the right person and then they become an advocate and then the person next to becomes an advocate. That's a very interesting opportunity. Now, that might be something that, fire chiefs and police chiefs are uncomfortable with. And I certainly understand that. I mean, there's political aspects to that as well, especially since, we're all experiencing a staffing crisis right now. We're doing more with less, more than we ever have before. And sometimes public safety executives have to have the integrity to look their appointed and elected officials and their influential residents in the eye and say, we don't have everything we need. And we're not asking for the sky and the moon here. We just don't have everything that we need to manage these incidents as effectively as we think we should.
It's certainly an expanding need within the first response community to prepare with it. And with that comes finances and thinking. As we round out our threats, there is the existence of potential complacency. A lot of people were very motivated by the event. I got a lot of great feedback for people that were involved. It made them want to go to more training that involved MCI training and treatment stuff. And it's easy for our systems to either get sidetracked or complacent.
I would think everyone on this call and everyone tuning in later works in public safety, has had a significant other or another member of their family or even a neighbor say, hey, what are you doing about this active violence thing? If a Uvalde were to occur in name your Oakland County community, what are you doing to prepare for that? The question is, the person that's being asked that question, how comfortable are they with the answer that they're providing? If that isn't motivation enough, I don't know what is.
With these events occurring in such high frequencies, every time I see one on the news or read about it in an article, I try to envision how our department would respond to that. And if we're prepared and we have the tools, how the outcome might be if we're in our community. And I think that every agency should be doing something similar. If you just assume that we're ready to go because we trained on this 3 years ago, I think you might be in for a sad day. So I think constantly looking at what our potential response is critical.
When Mike and I first started discussing this, we were pitching this as MCIs aren't an if, it's a when. And then that when happened to us. And that made us realize that even in the least suspecting communities, something like this can and will occur, and that there is no room for complacency. We need to be ready. Just because you're in a certain zip code or a certain county does not prevent you from experiencing an MCI or a tragedy, and everyone must be ready for it.
So as we finish this out, let's get the recommendations from each one of our guests. Let's start with you, Captain Sova. What recommendations do you have for first responder agencies that are planning and executing similar events?
My biggest recommendation is to start early and involve as many people as are interested in helping. There's a lot of tremendous resources that we were able to have participate in our event, and it wouldn't have been possible without them. So contact people that know what they're doing early on, and it makes your life a lot easier.
Totally agree. Get team members that are willing to work with you. BC Van Heck.
Yeah, the large portion that I dealt with was the actual scenario itself. And I think a couple factors that I think people need to consider with the scenario is how many people are going to be needed to help run the scenario. You're going to need somebody inside with the patients. You're going to need somebody outside with people in staging. You're going to need somebody with the dispatchers. You're going to need somebody all over, and you have to spread these people out, and you have to communicate during the incident. But the biggest thing is you need to keep the incident moving. But in a lot of situations like this, it just seems to move on its own. And don't try to predictate out exactly what you want. It turns it more into a training instead of a real life scenario. Let the scenario flow the way that it naturally would go. And I think people will learn from that. And then if you have to, if it's possible, do it a couple times. And hopefully by that second and third time, you're seeing it get smoother and more efficient.
Lieutenant Bailey.
I think it's important that when you're planning a drill like this, you don't take on more than you're capable of doing. You define your objectives, get clear objectives. But sometimes these types of training incidents can just get out of control in a hurry. Maybe you have to do a couple of smaller scale incidents that build off each other to build your skills to do it. But any kind of a training is a good training in this aspect. Getting the more people involved, the more agencies who are going to be involved from the get-go. And they're going to be your agencies that you work with around you, not just from way out, from farther distance from your borders or your communities, is important.
Chris Lopez, from the hospital standpoint, your recommendations.
I think it's very important to look at the reasons for why to do an event like this and not focus on the reasons not to, whether it be staffing, the fear, uncertainty, attendance, you name it. There's a million reasons why not to attempt something like this, but we need to keep in our minds why we're doing it, why it's important, and realize that it is possible. When we first started discussing this event and drew it out on paper, there were a lot of detractors who would say this is impossible, this can never happen. And with everyone that we were able to pull together, from resources, educators, instructors, we were able to build this by using that span of networks and friends and departments, communities, to build something big. One person can't do this. So definitely rely on your partners, your networks, your communities. This does take a village to make it a success.
Lieutenant Etzin.
Two brief things. Number one, weaponize your non-conventional stakeholders. So your appointed and elected officials, members of the media. We talked about corporate citizens, members of the community as a whole. Figure out how you can educate and inform them to the point where they're supporting our efforts. The other thing I would say is these offenders, these incidents don't care about county lines. So given where Farmington Hills is located, we're making sure that Northville Township, Livonia, Redford, and even Detroit are in the loop on things that we're doing, because when a major, if and when a major event kicks off in our community, we're going to need all our friends north of 8 Mile and south of 8 Mile. So don't let those county lines get in the way of cultivating those relationships.
Wise words. Thank you all for joining me today. I think this was very useful, and I hope this is very motivating to our agencies and personnel listening today. So thank you guys very much. Have a great day. That is all for the show today, everyone. This event is just one example of how first responders are preparing for future MCIs for the sake of saving lives and protecting our communities. In future episodes, we will have similar conversations with more first responder leaders about planning and executing MCI events. Thank you to Lieutenant JEtzin, Captain Mike Sova, Battalion Chief Al Van Heck, Lieutenant Jbailey, and Chris Lopez for coming on the show and discussing the value of collaborating and training for the next bad day. Y'all have been a pleasure to work with on this project, and I hope we've inspired more agencies to train. Please email us your feedback and tell us what you think about this show, or send us your ideas for future episodes to Jeff, that's GEOFF at OCMCA.org. Thank you for listening to the MedControl Monthly Podcast, providing the latest updates, information, and trends to and on behalf of the EMS agencies and hospitals of Oakland County, Michigan. Have a great day.